Deposit Bonds Explained. I've got a special guest on today, Marcus VC from Deposit Solutions. We're going to talk about what is a deposit bond, why would you need one, and how do you get one. Stay tuned. Testing. How are you?
Mate, what an intro. What an intro. Yeah. That was unbelievable. I'm good, Billy. How are you?
Good, thank you. It's really nice to do a deal together.
It is. It is nice. The circumstances of this one required a little bit of work, but mate, we're changing lives. We're making dreams come true.
It's really good. Like, I haven't actually used a deposit bond myself in a little while. So I had to reach out to the expert on behalf of a client. And basically, let's start with, what is a deposit bond? You'd be the best person to unpack it.
Yeah, sure. It's probably the best place to start. I think, honestly, the easiest way to answer that question, Billy, is to, first of all, say, like, what a deposit bond isn't. Because a lot of people have a misconception around what it is, how it works, et cetera, et cetera. So the first thing I will say is it's not a loan. It's not issued by a bank. There's no interest. There's no repayments. There's no security taken over property or anything like that. What it is it's a digital certificate that serves as a substitute for the deposit on a property to execute an exchange. Okay, so usually, as you know, a purchaser has to pay a 10% or otherwise agreed amount up front on a property to be able to exchange on it. The deposit bonds acts as opposed to that cash deposit.
I guess your typical client would be someone who's sold but doesn't have access to their deposit yet. So if you get a release of deposit, you've got your purchaser's deposit to take forward onto your purchase. But if you don't have access to that, this is a really good solution. Or someone who just doesn't have liquid 5 or 10% deposit. It might be sitting in a term deposit account. It might not have come to fruition yet. So this is a really good alternative. And buying a property, it's not a small sum of cash, but you can extend this up to 100, 200,000. That's sort of the realms of normal for you.
Yeah, look, you can take a bond out. Like, we've facilitated bonds for purchases up to $9-10 million with 5.5 year settlement dates on them. So, as long as it can make sense to the underwriter who's assessing it, anything can kind of be considered. And the examples you used before are spot on. Someone who needs to sell before they can buy. They look at it and they go, the difference between them being able to purchase that property or not is being able to facilitate the exchange and come up with a deposit. They might not have the cash on hand. A deposit bond allows them to be able to do that. Another one that we have quite a lot, Billy, is people who have really extended settlement terms. And the last thing they want to do is park their cash in, respectfully, a real estate agent's trust account doing nothing for them. So people like that, it's a couple of $100,000. They would much rather keep that in a savings account, earning interest for them, have that in their term deposit, even just have access to it. Some people just don't want it to be parked away for a long period of time. A deposit bond allows them to be able to do that.
And that's a really good segue into, all right, so what's the rough cost of this, and why would you do it? Because you're not going to pay for the service if it's not going to benefit you. If you think about, though, keeping your funds liquid or keeping it in your savings account, like you were telling me off air, you see clients that almost come to the basically net neutral. So the savings they can keep in their savings account is generating interest, and that covers the cost of putting the bond through you guys.
Yeah, look, to be completely transparent, like, coming out net neutral would be, not a worst case scenario, but most of the clients we work with, the savings and interest or the amount they would save by having funds still parked in offset or still tied up in their investment asset grossly exceeds the cost of the bond, which is a one-off payment, by the way. It's a one-off payment, so you pay it and the bond gets issued and away you go. I can give you some examples if you want, Billy, like of what they could look like for some different purchases.
$1 million apartment, and let's do a $2 million house.
All right, I'm going to pretend that I'm calculating this in my head, but I've got a calculator in front of me, so I'm just going to quickly whiz over to this. For the sake of the example, just to set the scene, let's go $1 million apartment. Let's say it is a 6-month settlement term. Okay, so a bit of a longer settlement term. So ordinarily, the purchaser would be required to come up with $100,000, right? 10%, unless agreed otherwise. Let's say 10%. So that's $100,000. Now, if they were to take out a bond as opposed to the $100,000, it means they can leave the $100,000 wherever it is now, or not have to use $100,000 and use the bond instead. Now, look, if you, and again, this is based on, there's a few asterisks, it's a 6-month term with a 5% interest rate on a savings account, $100,000 in there, circa $2,500 in interest earned is what I'm getting here, okay?
Yeah.
When I'm looking at the cost of the potential bond, the indicative bond, it's a fair bit less than that, okay? So that example, you're coming up reasonably on top already, and I'll say it's over $1,000. $2 million example, let's look at the same thing, okay? So purchase price, $2 million. What's that, Billy, in DY at the moment? Is that a house?
What does that buy you? Yeah, you can get yourself a nice townhouse. You can get yourself an entry-level house. Might need a little bit of work, but I guess that's why you've kept your savings dry. So, yeah, it's good buying.
Okay. Well, I think a good way to look at that and put it in the context is let's go a $2 million, we'll say a smaller dwelling that maybe someone's downsizing into. Okay, so let's say they've got a lot of equity in a property that they're selling. They don't have a whole lot of cash on them, as is the case with a lot of people, and they want to be able to purchase this next property for $2 million in DY that Billy's selling them. What are they going to do? They need $200,000. Do they go in, rip out of their term deposit, pay an exit fee and forego interest? Maybe. Do they try and take on some additional debt? I doubt a downsizer wants to take on additional debt, and it could be complicated to even do that with a lender. Or do they look at a deposit bond, be able to utilize that as opposed to having to use the cash? It's examples like that where a deposit bond can be really, really powerful and convenient for the purchaser to use. So on that example, comparing it to the other one, over 6 months, if that's parked in a savings account, 5% interest, again, these are estimations for anyone listening because there's a whole lot of variables there. I'm getting around $5,000 in interest that would be earned, okay, on $200,000 over 6 months. Again, the bond fee to be able to acquire that is less than $5,000. I can tell you that for sure. Exactly what it is depends on the applicant, the type of bond they get. There's a few different pieces there that we'd have to work out, but in that example, it would be less than the amount that's safe.
Yeah, that's great. And the pieces of information that we just worked on a deal together, the client sort of gave you was the purchase contract with their name on it as to what they're buying, if they're selling, the sale contract, their ID, a couple of questions which the underwriter would take on. And it was quick and easy. I mean, from the agent's perspective.
Oh, that's. I'm glad to hear that from you, Billy. It honestly is. It's almost. I think what people do is they look at it and they think of everything that's involved with a property transaction. So they automatically associate it with the likes of acquiring, lending, or the purchase process itself, which we know can be stressful and quite intensive when you consider contract reviews and pest and builds and all the rest of it. But the deposit bond process it can be almost too simple. We're talking, we usually say around 48 hours. We can have bonds issued in, the same day if we have all the right information up front. But in our example today, with that particular purchaser, that was literally just the contract from the property they were selling, the contract from the property they were purchasing, some identification, and that was sufficient for the underwriter to be able to conduct an assessment.
Now, my red hot question has just slipped my mind.
Lucky for me.
What is? Do you ever get kickback from the vendor's solicitor or the vendor that's accepting this deposit bond? Like, what is their feeling on it, and how do you, as a buyer, how do you work around that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it depends on the particular market that we're working in. We facilitate a lot of deposit bonds for off the plan purchases, and usually that's because they have such long settlement periods, and people don't want to park their cash for 3, 4, 5 years while the property gets completed. So usually when that happens, we're working with agents and subsequently developers who work with solicitors who understand them quite well. So they are reasonably conditioned to them. Sometimes when it's potentially home buyers or different markets that aren't too familiar, the vendor solicitor mightn't entirely understand it. And I think that the way that I would usually look to articulate that to them is to get them to look at it as an insurance policy, a backed insurance policy. And it operates the same way that a normal one would, right? So if the purchaser was to default or be unable to complete on the purchase, then the vendor would have the right to that deposit from the insurer. They'd get paid out. So that would be where their risk would be accounted for. And then the insurer, on the other hand, would then technically go after the purchaser for the deposit. So it acts as an insurance policy in that respect, which when there is some misunderstanding or a lack of confidence from the other end, that's usually the best way we communicate it.
Which is like the same thing. If you're accepting a 5% deposit and your purchase doesn't complete and you pursue them for the second half, you've kind of got to go down the same route with a litigation lawyer. So it's not default straight into your account. Like it's... I think that's why people do like the old-fashioned 10% in trust, and sometimes they split the interest in the middle at the end. But it's a modern way that we're basically we're transacting now, and there's still that insurance policy there. I've noticed it's helpful from a buying perspective, and in the current market, vendors are looking for the agent to be a solution-based middleman. And if you're not fortunate where you've got thousands of offers flying at you, and you might have one really good offer, but you've just got to unlock them out of their current selling position into the buying position. And this could be the thing that gets it done.
Yeah, and I think something that often people don't understand as well, and I think it's useful for any purchaser out there at the moment if they're eligible for a deposit bond. You don't have to be at the point where you're about to exchange on a property to be pre-approved for one, as they call it. There is such a thing as where you can get someone to a position where you're as approved as possible for a bond to be issued, and then you can go around, you can look at properties, you can go to auctions, you can compete for property, commence your search and the likes, with the confidence that you don't have to worry about the deposit when it comes up. You know exactly what your limit is, what that's going to look like in the same way that you otherwise would. And then all it would take is, once you have a contract that's been prepared when you are pursuing a property, you would make that as part of your application to the underwriter, and then that would in turn finalize the assessment where the bond could then be issued.
There you go. I love this. I think that's helpful for some people out there. Like, if you've not heard of it before, this might sound like, as I said, a solution based to maybe get your plan started a little bit sooner. Marcus, you're really easy to find. Deposit Solutions, just put it in online, you'll pop up. If you need Marcus's direct line, message here, I'll get it over to you. And anything else that you need to sign off with?
Mate, well done today. I'll sign off with that. Both the purchasers and vendors are very, very fortunate to be working with you, mate. So job well done. Good work.
Thank you. That's kind. But look, it is about having the right people in your corner. And I'm not talking about just real estate agent and Deposit Solutions, but it's a good solicitor. It's a good broker. It's people that understand these things. And all round, as the buyer and seller in the transaction, it just comes out as a smoother process and overall 100%. A nicer experience. So if you can try and find ways to make your overall experience that bit nicer, I think you'll end up loving your property more. You'll move in and you'll think that was just sweet. We actually really enjoyed that. And as a seller, you end up going, that was a good price, and it didn't just feel like it dragged on.
Oh, so, mate, you hear so many people look back on their purchasing experience and look at it negatively, and it doesn't need to be like that. It's not always it's not always things that they can necessarily control, but there is such a way to purchase property, even in Sydney when it's so highly competitive. and come out of it and look back and go, yeah, that was a really positive experience.
I couldn't agree more. Control the controllables and let the variables be the the things that are the minority, hopefully.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
There you go. All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time coming on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.